Welcome back to the YDIDPod podcast, where we talk all things sibling loss and grief. My name is Kim.
And I am Kat. And today we are talking about how loss and grief impact the relationship dynamics of many relationships we have in our lives, as well as how it impacts our career paths and our ability to show up at work. So let's get into it.
Oh, gosh. I have such a funny perspective with the career aspect because obviously it very drastically affected everything.
Yeah.
But I also think there's
It was a huge catalyst in your story.
Yeah. Like, I was at such an in-between already, and I had already done so much work around what I was wanting to do and where I was trying to go career-wise. And I sometimes feel like if things didn't happen how they happened with losing Brady, I may not have, well, I know I would have eventually started my businesses, right? But I definitely don't think I would have had it in me to just do it in 2020. And I started them in 2020 before the pandemic. I went full-time with tarot in January of 2020, and then I did later expand to the metaphysical shop and like all of my mentorship in May of 2020. But I think that, you know, Brady's energy was very like, just shoot your shot, man. Like,
Very Gemini energy, like
give
fucking
her some.
yeet it.
That's
do
why
it.
I have give her some tattooed on my arm because it's just like, you gotta just send it, man.
Yeah, sometimes that's really the vibe.
Yeah. So I feel like my situation, I'm also very fortunate that I was, again, in an in-between. I had a job, but if I had been at the job I was at previously, I would not have had the same like freedom and flexibility that I had as I was actually able to experience, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah.
But holy shit, the patriarchy is not set up.
Down with the patriarchy.
Capitalism is not this. It's not it, man.
No,
it
it's
is not supportive of
Humanness.
of being a human, of losing people, of having to grieve. Bereavement? You get 2 or 3 days, depending on the company.
Yeah. If you work for a great company, you get 3 days.
Oof. Which I just think is wild because you can't even
grieve in 3 days.
But also I couldn't even grieve a pet in 3 days.
No.
So who is that for? What is that for?
Right.
And also, if we're being realistic about
Can you
it,
even process a death in 3 days?
but also if we're being really realistic about it, you can't even plan a funeral.
No. Oh my God, no.
Take the emotional
funeral
aspect.
homes work quick. That
Right.
is literally the business. That's the business that they're in. They have
But
to work
like,
quick.
take the emotional aspect out of it. I mean, it's all emotional, right? But
Right.
like,
But the logistical piece of it actually doesn't even make sense. You
How do you
cannot
do that?
plan services within 3 days.
I mean, it's just, and then there's always different circumstances with, not to be morbid, but like the state of the body, the time of
it's true.
year, the climate that you live in, environmentally, like,
Yeah.
it's just,
There's a lot of
what
factors.
does your 3 days do? Like,
Right.
some people, especially, right? Like, again, we live local to where our siblings are, but what if you live across the country? 3 days, you might just be getting home, like,
That's
or
crazy.
recovering, or like, I just don't.
Yeah.
What are you supposed
What
to
if
do
you're
with
living
that?
across the world? I mean, I think about it. I never lived across the world, but I lived abroad for school for a month. What would I have fucking done if I was across the world?
Well,
never mind
and-
across the country.
And I think we need to address, we're not stupid. The answer is vacation time. Use your vacation time.
Right.
Is that what your vacation time is for?
Right.
Would you say that when you were grieving James, was that a vacation for you?
Well, some people thought it was.
If you watched the last episode.
Yeah, go back and watch it if you haven't. Yeah, so, well, and it's interesting because, like, actually speaking of that, right, like, I am incredibly fortunate that I was working where I was working at the time. To be fair, I think I don't want to make a gross blanket statement, but I think in general, you're going to find more compassion and understanding with real life things that come up when you're working in mental health than you would otherwhere. I am not saying that every mental health agency is great at giving a shit about their employees.
Yeah.
There are tons that don't.
Right.
That's why the mental health and healthcare system is where it's at, not to get on that tangent. But I'm really grateful and lucky that I was able to take 3 months vacation. I had a terrible work-life balance. I was also running 2 group homes, which is not normal. Normally, you would be responsible for 1 group home. I was doing the job of 2 people. So I was not taking any vacation time, so I had a shit ton of it banked. And they absolutely could have said to me, if you want to take that much time off, you need to apply for MFMLA because that is legally what they could have done.
Right.
And they were very gracious and understanding that my 21-year-old brother was dead. So they were like, bitch, take all the time you need. Also, to be fair, and this is not something I probably would have done even 6 months ago, the other reason why they did that is because I'm a good worker and they couldn't afford to lose me. So I will also acknowledge that piece of it. Spoiler alert, they did lose me. I realized I took so much time off of that job. And in that summer that we had lost time, I spent a lot of time gardening, which was so cathartic. I think we will eventually talk about how cathartic, nature is. But it was so healing. And I spent so much time outside that I realized I fucking hate what I'm doing for a living. I fucking hate it. And I cannot do this for the next 50 years. Yeah. I will... Not to be morbid, but I would have killed myself. Like, I'm serious. Like, if that was the life I continued to live, like, I don't actually think I would have been able.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I'm in a similar setting work-wise, but I'm in a very different place.
Right.
And also, it's still a very different job.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's true. Like, I'm really fortunate that I had a company that was like, you do you, girl. Most companies would not have.
Yeah.
Would not have. Yeah.
And then even then, right? Like the 3 months, I won't speak for you, but what's 3 months? Like
literally the time came where I had to make a decision where it was like, you're either going back to work or you need to find something else to do for work. You can't just not work. Like that's the reality we live in. We have to pay our bills or else we don't have a house to live in. So, yeah, that was a really hard decision. Like I knew I was miserable there, but I didn't know what to do. I felt really stuck.
Yeah.
I think the other factor, definitely a deciding factor for me was I work with people. Well, we do similar things actually. You do personal development in a spiritual sense, and I do personal development from like a mental health standpoint. Yeah. And all of it is very demanding of us to show up for people. And it was just so abundantly obvious to me that I could not show up for anyone and be like, hey, friend, this is how you fix your life, when I didn't even know how to fucking get up and brush my teeth some mornings. Right. Like, I didn't even have the drive to do that. So, yeah, that was it was a really weird decision. I wanted to stay out of loyalty because they were so good to me. Like, I can't say that they weren't. They gave me 3 months off, no questions asked. They were like, use all your vacay time, do whatever the fuck you want to do. And then even after I ran out of vacay time, if I'm being completely candid, they gave me like another week or two because they just knew.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for that. And which is why it made it really hard for me to make the decision to leave, because I felt indebted to them. I wasn't indebted to them. I was just very grateful for them, yeah. But I felt indebted to them.
Yeah.
And it was a very hard choice, probably the first time in my life where I actually chose me.
Well, and also it's just the awareness of I can't show up the way that I probably need to be showing up.
Oh, yeah. As good as a job as I was doing of running both those houses, which is why I was given a second house, because I had done so good of supporting them to get that first house back into, the state that it should have been in, because it was not up to code when I got there. So because I had been so successful in doing that with the first house, that's why I was given a second house, because they needed that. And I was happy to do it at the time. I was young, I was fresh out of college, I was hungry, I was excited to get my fucking hands
trying to show your worth.
Yeah, I wanted to show my worth, and I have this like visceral need to help people. Like it's like a disease in the best way. But it's in my being. I can't not do it.
Yeah.
So it was just this very weird moment of finally choosing myself and recognizing, like, I would really love to show up for these people, but I'm actually not able. and me lying to myself and shoving my grief down to make it more palatable and comfortable for other people, it wasn't an option for me. It just wasn't, because I wasn't going to live my life anymore not putting myself first.
Yeah.
That's, I think, like the big thing that I came out of losing James, is I was like, okay, I got it. We're taking care of ourselves.
I feel like for me, man, it's just so interesting to reflect back on what was going on during that time and just the timing of everything. I had been working, my whole background is in retail. I went to college
Mostly
for
fashion, right?
Like
Yeah.
I was working at a designer boutique on Newbury Street and I loved it. But while I was there, I knew it was going to be the last place that I worked retail. I was like, this is going to be it for the fashion girly. Like this is where we leave it.
This is where we shift gears. Yeah.
And I was, again, doing a lot of inner work and really trying to figure out who the fuck I wanted to be. I was like, you know, I won't get into my spiritual journey, but I spent a lot of time not feeling like I knew what my purpose was and what I was supposed to be doing.
I could resonate with that. Yeah.
And
I hear that.
I kind of had this moment where I started doing the work and being like, where do I want to go? Do I need to be in retail? Because I was getting, while I loved the specific job and the specific place and the brand and everything, I hated retail.
Right.
Those that work retail, you know, it's just.
It's terrible.
And even though I was really good at it, like, because again,
It does take a special person to be good at retail.
when I believe in what I'm trying to sell, promote, whatever, it's very easy for me.
Yes.
If I believe in what I'm saying, then I just want to take you with me, right?
Yeah. Well, you're a very candid and honest, open person. So I feel like,
I try to be.
Yeah.
And so I knew that that was not my place. And so I kind of had to sit down with myself and be like, all right, so I know I want to be doing something else. I know I want to eventually be my own boss. I don't want to be in retail anymore because it is sucking the life out of me. It is sucking the joy out of my being. And I just don't want to deal with the, oh my gosh, the high-end clientele. And like, I have so many stories. But it was just the knowing that, oh, this is now a means to an end. I then, as soon as I opened up that door, got an opportunity with like a ground level startup marketing company, and they took me on. I had very minimal experience, but I had so much experience in my industry, and I'm pretty smart, so like I could pick it up.
You're a resourceful girly,
And
for sure.
what they had me doing was like very much just kind of bookkeeping, admin, mild production, which I already did also for Mike's company. So I was able to take that opportunity, and that allowed me to work from home when I wanted to. It was kind of flex. I'd go into the office some days, work from home other days, with the goal of getting me to the point where I could work from home full time. And so that alleviated this like need for me to just the timing, right? Like I literally started, I was at that marketing job for a few months, and then everything with Brady happened, and I was able to have a month off, no questions asked. They were fully just like, let us know when you're ready to come back.
That's so lucky. Yeah, that's amazing. I think every company should do that.
It's just crazy because if I hadn't taken that leap and made that decision, I would have been at my retail job where they would have been like, you have 2 days.
Right.
Like, I don't know.
Which is insane.
And I could have probably taken a little bit more time, but again, I was still relatively new, so I didn't want to like push it. And like,
well, also too, let's talk about like the part of like that plays into that of being in your early 20s too. Like, so when you're in your early 20s at a new job, even if it's a job that you've been in at a year, right? There's that pressure to show up, to show your worth, to prove your worth. And
they were already taking a chance on me, right? Like I didn't have the most experience. I wasn't like, I was still learning as I went. And so it was like, I don't want to lose this opportunity. I don't want to go back to retail.
Right.
And so I was able to work from home. I did bump myself down to part-time because I just was like, I can't hit the ground running. Like, I just cannot. And that's because, like, when everything happened with Brady, like, there was a whole week between when he passed. I think there was 2 weeks, actually, between when he passed and when we actually... No, it was a week. Sorry, my brain.
No, trauma be playing with them timelines for real.
So there was a whole week between when we were able to actually finally have his services. And then I stayed another week after that because my family was falling apart.
Right, yeah.
Mike stayed for the first 2 weeks, I believe, with me. And then he came down and then he was going to come back up to get me another couple weeks later.
Yeah.
And yeah, I stayed home for a month and I just kind of existed in the space. Like,
That's a good word for that.
I really, like, I feel like it's so strange because it didn't feel like a month. Like, I'm someone
The days blend so quick.
I'm someone who, like, I'm from Maine originally and I love my family dearly, but going to college in Boston and all my friends
You created
being
a
down
new
here,
life for yourself.
but I kind of got to a point where I was like, I cannot go home for more than like 3 days because
Yes.
there's nothing to do.
Yes,
Like, what do you do
'cause
up
you're
here?
versus living in the city versus living in the woods.
So then,
Yeah.
so then when I was there for a month and I didn't even blink, I was like, oh, I'm not okay.
Something is wrong here.
Because I literally just floated. Like, I just existed. It was the end of summer, beginning of fall. And my parents live at their camp on the lake. So I literally was just like sitting on the water, going in between sobbing and sleeping. And
those first few months is so, they're like a fucking roller coaster. I remember, so like I was working as that group home manager. I was blessed to be able to take 3 months off. But after that 3 months, and it might have even been less time than that, actually. I think I'm actually like exaggerating. I think it was really more like a month and change. They gave me a week, that extra week or so that they gave me. And then at the 2-month mark, I was like, I cannot come back and I don't want to string you along.
right.
But the time all blends and I was jobless for a little while after that.
Yeah.
I mean, I was lucky those first 2 months I was getting a full check because I did have, my time saved up. But, like, the other piece of this is, too, is, like, there's that financial piece. Like, I have to pay my bills. I don't want to go back to work, but I got to that point where I was like, I literally need to pay bills. Which is, like, I feel like for anyone listening to this, there's probably, like, a duh. Like, yes, we're not stupid. We're also just talking about
But
this
also when you're trying to process such a traumatic loss, and especially, like, in our cases is a little different than other types of sibling loss where maybe it's anticipated or...
Right. Nobody was sick.
Nobody
was on
They were both very
beds.
young.
Yeah.
They were both more or less accidents. And it just... You're processing that. You're processing a whole new family dynamic. You're also processing everyone you love around you going through this
the same thing, but in a different
way.
Yeah.
And you still have to pay your bills.
Right. And
it's just
also by the way, you need to like find a way to function.
Yeah.
So I remember, so I took like the whole summer off and I don't know what I honestly can't even with like any level of accuracy tell you what I did that summer.
That's
I know
what I mean.
like,
I don't know what I did.
I know that I gardened a lot. I know that I threw myself into gardening because I didn't know what else to do. And what I loved about gardening is it did give me this safe space to unleash my rage.
Yeah.
To my poor neighbors, my parents' neighbors, really, because I went back home and I lived with my parents after my brother had passed. I stayed with my girlfriend for like a few days because I needed like space to just like not be in their grief. But then as soon as I had like a few days to process, I went right back home and I lived there for probably 6 to 8 months after James died.
Yeah.
Maybe even a year. I was there. I was back home for a while. But I remember like just having the hardest time conceptualizing like, what do you mean I have to function and work?
I think it's that concept and that reality that like the world keeps moving.
Yes. And you're just there like, but my whole life just stopped and fell apart. And that's a really hard thing.
And the time is still
to
passing.
process.
You're picking up the pieces. You're trying to figure out who you are now and what your life is.
Because you're a different person.
And the world is just moving and moving and moving, and time is passing, and you're like, wait.
Yeah. And I think I am a person who I struggled with a lot of anger when my brother passed away. There was also a lot of layers to that with like how he passed and some of the family dynamics and generational trauma.
Well, in your relationship at the time too.
Yeah, and our relationship at the time wasn't like the best. It wasn't the worst, but because of where he was in his struggle, it was definitely not like at its best. But yeah, I mean, so I took the whole summer off. I can't even tell you with any accuracy what I did that summer. I gardened a lot. I screamed a lot. I broke a lot of things in the backyard by throwing them because I was just that fucking angry that why my family, why my brother. And then I don't know when I got this job. I like, again, like there's no accuracy. This timeline is so fucked in my head. I think the first job I went back to was landscaping, which was super fucking random for anybody that knew me at that point in my life. Yeah. Everybody was like, "You're gonna what?" And I remember a lot of my family members, because my family is very traditional and Irish and Catholic and Italian. So, and I love them. But I remember being like, I can't do the mental health thing. I'm gonna go do something that I love. And I loved gardening so much.
Well, how can you do the mental health thing?
Right. Like I can't even take care of my own mental health. How am I supposed to fix somebody else's mental health? So I got a job landscaping with an amazing company. They're called Planet Pascal. I will probably very rarely shout out anybody for real by name here, but I have to give this company and these human beings a shout out. The owners, Stephen and Pascal. Pascal is the artist behind, the genius behind all of these amazing, like, artscapes. They're landscapes, but they are artscapes. They're beautiful. And I had no experience. They absolutely could have been like, what? Why do you want to work with us? And they were so happy to take me on. I'm grateful that my aunt had actually worked with them years before when they were all in Boston as in their 20s all together. So I was really lucky that my aunt had that connection. She was more than happy to call a friend, which is not something I normally would accept as the older sibling, the always figuring it out person. Yeah. It was really hard for me in that period of grief to accept help. But going to landscape was interesting because I loved it. I loved it. I was so excited. It inspired me to start my own small business, and it inspired me to grow my own food and always continue to grow my own food. But I remember that the first time I told everybody in my family, everyone was like, "You're throwing your future away. What are you doing? Like, your career is ruined." I remember a few people in my family, because they're so traditional, "That's a man's job." And I was like, okay.
Wait till you hear about my partner.
Right. Wait till you hear about my lesbian partner.
Talk about a man's job.
So that was one of those things that it was like a really weird mental process for me, where I had been a very rigid person because I grew up in a very rigid family environment. And it wasn't just my family. I went to Catholic school for 10 years. Like, I grew up in a very rigid environment. So for me to question and shift my belief systems about like career and how your career makes you as a person or what that says about you as a person. Yeah. It was so fucking freeing, but it was so fucking scary and hard at that point. Yeah. Because I was 25, so I didn't have a lot of experience. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. Best thing I could have done for myself. Best people I've ever worked for to this day. Yeah. Hardest choice I think I ever made. Not hardest, but like one of the hardest, because it went against every grain in my body, every rigid.
Everything you had been working towards.
Everything I knew, everything I'd been working towards. Yeah.
I think Yeah, I don't know. I really don't. Again, I know I would have started my businesses eventually. It's in my being. I was supposed to, but I really think that Brady being on my team
Yeah.
just really pushed me to be like, no, why? Why? What are you waiting for? I had
Right.
already been like reading tarot professionally. I just wasn't relying on it full time. And also the other piece of that, which kind of segues us into our next kind of topic, but I wouldn't have been able to do that without Mike giving me the go ahead as well, because we had, after Brady passed, we decided to move in together, which is a whole thing because that was not the plan. And then him giving me the, yeah, try. Let's go
I
for
support
it,
you.
you know? Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
So let's talk about relationship dynamic shifts.
Those change a lot.
Loss. Where do we even start? I mean, I have a lot to say about my romantic relationship because that probably had the most transformation.
I think it has the most impact on your partner.
Yeah.
In my experience. Yeah.
It's-
Because in my experience, and I think this is, I don't want to speak for you, but I think this was also true of you and Mike, because I know that we've talked about this a lot, is like, there's this period and this thing that happens when you're grieving, this type of a deep, primal, guttural loss. Because this is like a primal connection. You and your siblings, you and your parents.
Yeah, it's a soul connection.
Yeah, and there's something that happens. You completely shut down. You know, like you can't you can't human, you can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't shower, you don't care about any of that shit. So there is a period where you completely shut down, and that person that you're in a partnership with, they don't have to step up. Of course, no one has to do anything.
Yeah.
But essentially, if they do kind of have to step up.
They do or they leave, right?
Right. Those are the two things. Like you
Yeah.
either step up or this is no longer, you know, gonna work because the dynamic is completely different.
It's a perfect example of seeing someone at their worst. I can tell you that. Like I
Good, bad, and all the in between.
I don't think I would have eaten if Mike wasn't making me eat. Or like he would be like, if you could eat one thing, what would it be? And he would just make it, you know? Like just because I just couldn't.
Yeah.
Like I don't even remember. It's like what we were saying earlier. I don't remember showering. Like I don't remember.
No, I don't
like,
remember doing any of those things for like a solid 4 to 6 weeks.
I remember my body having the urge to work out and being like, you should work out. Because I was like weightlifting regularly at the time. And that like urge, like, oh, go for a run or like go do some exercise. And I just ignored it and was like,
no, thank you.
I can't. Because it would make me happy. It would make me feel normal. It would
and
make
you felt
me
guilty.
Yeah.
Feeling normal.
And I didn't want to do that. So I just existed. And it's like that with everything. It's like, I don't want to eat. I don't want to take care of myself. I don't want to. It's all of the worst.
I don't know about you, but I know that we have we're all very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I have a history of wanting to unalive myself. Disclaimer, have not mentally or emotionally been there for years. I am safe. I am in safe space. Do not call MCI. Everyone over here is good. But I have
done the work.
We've done the work. We've used the DBC skills. We're great. But the truth of it is that I have a history of that. And I will not lie to you, when James died, I would have not ever actively done anything. I was well past that point in my life where I would have actively done something. But I wanted to die. There was a piece of me that was like, can I go too?
I can get morbid. We can get morbid for a minute. So.
Well, and how much that impacts your partner when you have no will to live.
Yeah.
You know?
So I have a history as well. And I thankfully am, not there anymore. But I feel like this is so strange, and I apologize to my mother in advance if she's watching this.
Yeah, same. I'm sorry, Mom, if you had to hear that. I'm safe.
I feel like when I used to struggle and I used to be in that place, I would think of my mom. And I would think about how I wouldn't want to do that to her.
Right. Yeah.
And then when Brady passed and I had to actually watch her go through that, I had a lot of thoughts of, one, I should have just done it because then I wouldn't have to see this and I wouldn't have to be
I remember
here
thinking that.
for this.
I remember thinking that if I had just followed through when I almost did, I wouldn't have to be experiencing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it was like, sounds so fucked, and it is. But I had this thought of, well, I can't kill myself now.
It's not fucked because I also had the same thought.
Well, that doesn't mean it's not fucked.
Well,
Just because you also think it.
See, I think that we think it's fucked though because we have this really unhealthy relationship with grief in our society.
Yeah.
We have this really unhealthy relationship with it where we're like, oh, it's ugly and uncomfy. Let's just like put it in the back of the closet and not talk about it.
No, but I did. I really did. I was like, well, I guess I can't use that out now because
Yeah.
I would never do this to my parents.
Yes.
Like I would not do this to my family.
How do I do this without you?
Yeah.
Like I don't even know how to human
because
without
we've
you.
never considered.
Right.
You never consider, and that's so normal.
Yeah.
Like you don't think about it's even going back to when we found out, right? Like you don't assume you're not going to assume that you're going to live your life without your sibling.
Right.
It's just not a thing. Your brain is now having to comprehend, not even comprehend what is happening, but adjust to a new reality that you have never considered. Because why would you consider
that your baby sibling would die not
Especially
only
as-
before you, but so young as they both
like,
passed.
Well, right, especially as the eldest sibling, like I'm going before everybody. Like
Right.
I get to say, I
Right.
get to haunt you. Like this is what the hell?
Right.
Like now I don't
I
get
had
to
plans,
like,
motherfucker.
it's so fucked.
No, and it's crazy too because I think if you haven't gone through that, it's really hard. I would imagine it's really hard if you haven't either lost a sibling, had a history of serious depression or wanting to unalive yourself, or a mix of the both. I can't imagine how hard that is to actually like comprehend as a partner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I actually don't have a frame of reference for what that, but I can't even imagine. So not only do you have your partner in your life who is trying to conceptualize what this means for you,
Yeah.
because they
Like,
have no frame of reference to
well, what
actually
does moving forward in a relationship look like?
after that,
Yeah.
right? And then also the dynamic it shifts for everybody else though. It's just not even in that immediate partnership. It shifts the dynamic of your relationship with your parents. I'm sure the relationship with your sister.
Yeah.
I know for a fact it shifted the relationship I had with a lot of my friends. You and I got very close. I got really, really close to some people. And then there were some people that I didn't feel like they saw me or could hold space for me. And because I was in such a vulnerable place, I was like, see you later. I don't need that shit right now. That's a fact.
Yeah. I'm very lucky that like, again, I had been doing the work, right? Like I had been setting boundaries left and right. I'd been cutting people out of my life left and right before all of this, thankfully. And
Yeah.
so the people that I have in my life now are the people who were with me then. I didn't really have too many people that I had to cut out, at least regarding that specifically.
Yeah.
I feel like what's hard is like I would never be upset with my friends for not asking how I'm doing or asking if I'm okay. But, you know, once it's like 6 months out, nobody's really asking you anymore. It's so bizarre because I can't expect them to. They don't know. That's why we're making this podcast.
Right.
Check on your friends because
Literally.
it is a daily struggle. You don't have to check on them every day. But I promise you, if you text them something out of the blue that is thoughtful and just making sure that they're okay, because you may, I don't know. I just feel like
No, it's true. And I think this goes back to the concept of like we as a society have a very unhealthy relationship with loss and grief and death. And we as people, because I know I'm guilty of this before I lost James.
Yeah.
Like I know I am.
Yeah.
Before you go through a major traumatic loss is very uncomfortable.
so uncomfortable.
Even after you've gone through a loss, it's uncomfortable. But I think especially if you don't have a context to like even kind of understand
Yeah.
what traumatic loss feels like.
Yeah.
You're like, what do I say? I'm sorry doesn't feel like enough. And let's be honest, like, no, I'm sorry, it's not going to fix anything.
Yeah.
But it's nice to know that you're being thought of. I mean, I have a friend who lost her mom, different because it's not a sibling, but she lost her mom, and that was a really hard loss for her. And her and I were talking about like this similarly, and she said to me that a friend texted her out of the blue and just said, I'm sure you think about your mom a lot. I love you. I'm just thinking about you, and she's always with you. And she was like,
It
probably
makes-
took less than 5 minutes to text me that, made my whole fucking day.
It makes such a difference.
Yeah.
And again, all of my friends are very amazing, and I'm very grateful for them.
Yeah.
A lot of them showed up at Brady's services that I wasn't expecting. And
Yeah.
I think it's such a tricky dynamic for me because I'm the I don't want to be like I'm the leader, because that's not what it is. But
No, but we both do have that energy where we're like, we're
I'm
take
very
chargers.
dominant in
Yes.
in my in all of my relationships, I think.
Yeah.
And so I think that a lot of my friends kind of look to me for like, what do you need? Tell us what you need. Tell us how to support you. And I couldn't do that because I didn't know what I needed.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of this weird balance of like, I don't really have an expectation for them. But I also, any support was so appreciated.
So, yeah.
And so all I can say to anybody watching or listening that knows somebody who's gone through this, especially if it was like a more traumatic, because that's the thing with sibling loss as well. It's usually traumatic. It is usually unexpected. It is not always. There's always going to be cases of illness.
Yeah, yeah. But it usually seems like, from what I can tell, because I feel like you and I, just in our circle of people alone, have had a lot of people lose their brothers in the past 4 years.
I will say, with the exception of people who are losing their siblings in their like 50s and 60s, that is still awful.
Yeah.
But I do think there's just a different dynamic in terms of you get to live your life together.
Yes, I would agree with that statement.
And like raise kids together and whatever.
Yeah.
But not that it makes it any less, obviously.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your point, right, like I had a lot of friends who were looking to me being like, what do you need from us? And I also had these two friends who, you two know who you are, and I could not be more grateful. I've had these people in my life since I was 14. They are two of my best friends in the world. One of them I mentioned actually in the last episode. I am an auntie to her beautiful, beautiful baby girl. And the other one is ironically, I always called him my brother, because he was. He's like a brother to me, which has a different weight to it now.
Right.
But I still love him like a brother. And the two of them, I didn't even tell them. I think my mom must have told them. The next day after I found out about James, they were at my parents' house, like picking me up, and they were like, let's go. And I was like, I'm so fucking grateful for you guys. So like, you don't have to know what to do to help your friends. Just show up for them.
My brother, so rude of him, honestly. My brother died on my best friend's birthday.
Very rude. My brother died a month before his 22nd birthday. So that
I
whole
remember
month is horrible.
I called my best friend Kelsey when we were driving up, when I was in that blur after I found out about Brady. And I was like, I'm sorry. I was like apologizing because it's her birthday.
Like you could like determine what
she
day.
She was like, Kim, what is going on?
Yeah, like what are you talking about?
But no, it really just, it is, it just is like about feeling seen, I think, again, right? It goes back to what we continue talking about, because it is the biggest theme, I think, with sibling loss, is just the overlooked part. Like, when you can show your friends that are going through loss, like, hey, I see you, and I know it's probably an everyday battle, and maybe you're having a really good day, and maybe you're doing really well, but I don't know about you, but I think about my brother every single day.
Every single day. Like, I think that he's the first thought I have in the morning and the first thought I have before I go to bed. Like, still to this day, we're coming up on 4 years in April, and every day. And
it's just, check on your people.
Yeah, absolutely. Check on your people. And then like also going off of that, because I know that as the older siblings, there was like this pressure to always like have it together. And then once your sibling dies, this pressure to show up for your parents. And like, how do you feel like your dynamic changed with your parents? Because I know that mine shifted in a lot of different ways, and it was different for each parent because I had a very different relationship with each of my parents.
I think it's so interesting because if I really reflect on it, my mom and I are very close, but we have our relationship's so like explosive sometimes because we're so similar.
I can resonate with that.
I think that actually really benefited us. I don't know if she would say the same thing, but I feel like my mom and I are kind of each other's person in that way, I think.
Yeah.
Where like we don't have to communicate, but if we are communicating with each other, it's understood. Like we know exactly what we're trying to say. And I don't know if that makes sense, but so I think that when everything happened with my brother, it solidified that because we were really leaning on each other, I think. Anyway, from my perspective, obviously, I don't really want to speak for my mom, but
of course,
I feel like she and I now, since then, not even just thinking about the direct aftermath, but now I feel like, I don't know if I would say we're closer, but it's also been almost 5 years. So maybe I'm just kind of in that new normal. I think that the communication is more, and I think it was not actually from a super healthy place, honestly. I think it was from, we both had a mutual fear of losing each other.
Well, that comes up a lot after that type of loss. I was always afraid after James died.
I kept having nightmares that something was going to happen to Mike.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that. I was having a lot of fear around Jess. Yeah. Jess would go out. My girlfriend is a thrifter. She owns a small business, and she does secondhand clothing. And she would just be going out for, like, literally to one store, which is, like, no more than an hour-long trip. And 20 or 30 minutes, and I'd be like, when are you coming home? Like, text me when, like, make sure you're driving safe. Yeah. Like,
the trauma of, like, and I even get it with, like, our cats. Like, I'm so, I think when you experience a trauma where, like, something so absurd happens and it's so permanent and it's so definite and it's so, like, this is your life now, sorry. It's terrifying. I only had nightmares about something happening to Mike, or, like, I had a dream that I was, like, in a car behind another car, and everyone in my family, Mike, was in the car in front of me, and it just blew up. Like, that's what I mean. Like, I had this
grief is so unreasonable.
I had this super irrational fear.
Yes.
And also, if something were to happen,
drop dead.
But something can happen in any minute. Like, you can't do anything about it. I can't live my life like waiting for something bad to happen.
No, can't do that. That's not really a way to live
but
life.
It really was. So I think with my mom and I, it was very like, she's making sure I'm not going to, like, self-harm or that I, just kind of gauging where each other were at realistically with our mental health. And then with my dad, that's like a whole fucking thing, man. Watching.
Well, it was his only son.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, of course, both of their only son.
My dad
that's his father.
Yeah.
I feel like that's.
And my dad is he's just that very soft, like, compassionate. He cares so deeply about everybody, and he's a protector.
Yeah.
And so being put in a situation where he can't fix it and he can't change it, and it's not right.
Yeah. Well, especially as a father, right? Like, that is.
Well, and losing a child is so unnatural.
So unnatural. So it literally goes against the natural order of life. So, I think people maybe in earlier generations would disagree because life wasn't always like that.
Yeah.
And I actually sometimes I wonder if that's why we as a society don't pay so much attention to sibling loss, because when our grandparents,
We're not all supposed to make it.
right, exactly, when our grandparents were living in families of 10 to 12 children, not everybody made it, and that was very normal.
Yeah. But again, it's again that balance of
Oh yeah, absolutely.
how old are we when we're but yeah, and then so my dad's like a whole thing. I could go into that forever, and then I just feel like yes, it's changed.
Yeah.
The dynamic has changed.
Yeah, no, it changes a lot. I feel like for me, what I started to realize, and it took me some time because I was like obviously in absolute like grief and trauma within those first like 6 to 8 weeks. But I think over time what I started to really realize is I started to see the patterns in my parents, and not in a judgmental way.
Yeah.
Probably for the first time in my life, actually, not in a judgmental way. Not to say that I am like constantly like shitting on my parents, but I think that's a really interesting thing that you go through in your early 20s, where like your parents are no longer these perfect people on pedestals, but they're like humans who have like made mistakes, because that's what humans do.
Yeah.
And I really started to see the parallels to like me.
Oh, they're just humans.
Yeah. And then like the parallels in mine and James's behavior and the way that we show up in the world. And for me, I had been doing a lot of healing work before James passed, and a lot of like self work, but it got kicked all the way up to 10th fucking gear when that happened. And I started to really like reflect on that in the way that the patterns, the generational trauma was playing out in my family of origin, in the way that I was carrying those patterns of trauma, in the way that I was showing up. And it's given me more grace for my parents. Previously, I didn't have a lot of grace for them. And it's not because I don't think they're great parents. I just think we're all a little hard on our parents. I think that's a very normal thing everybody goes through in their early 20s and late teen years. And
you nitpick.
Yes, that's a great word for it. And like, I think I just finally got to this point of grace and gratitude. And
I had
it
a
was
lot
one
of
of those
fear.
beautiful things that came out of grief that I honestly didn't expect that, because I didn't always have a great relationship with my parents.
I totally get that. I think I definitely had the admiration. But I think with that admiration was a fear of it like falling apart. What if we can't keep it together?
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, that's valid.
And it's that eldest daughter brain kicking in.
Yeah, that
like,
eldest daughter, I need to fix it brain. Yeah, it's really interesting how
I think
it changes a lot.
I think we'll do another episode talking about like just I'll get Mike to come on.
I think we're definitely going to have episodes where like our partners share their perspective. Mike's definitely going to come on and share his perspective as a partner. My Nana actually lost her brother in a traumatic car accident when they were she was probably actually around my age that I was when I lost James. She was a lot older than her brother.
Let's get her on.
I want her to come.
I would love that.
We have a lot of good people, I feel like, lined up. People who have this experience, but also people from a different experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So moral of the story from today's episode, check on your friends.
Yeah, check on your friends. Check on your peeps. Check on the people who always seem to have it together.
Especially those people.
Yes.
And if you're not already, you can come hang out with us on Instagram. You can come send us an email if you want to share your story. We would love to talk about your sibling or share your perspective. And we will see you all next time.
Absolutely. Thank
Thanks
you guys
for
for joining
listening.
us.